Um, when we look at a massive, centuries-old tree, our eyes are just naturally drawn upward.
Right, to the canopy.
Exactly, to the sweeping branches, the leaves catching the sunlight, all of that. We really just admire the sheer scale of what is visible above the ground.
Yeah.
But if you were to ask a botanist what actually makes that tree what it is,
They wouldn't look up at all.
no, they wouldn't. They tell you that what determines its strength, its resilience, why it leans a certain way, or, how it survives a drought. Well, the story of that tree is completely written in the dirt.
Yeah, in the soil.
Right. And today, welcome to our deep dive, because we are applying that exact same botanical lens to a massive mystical concept, which is karma.
And doing that demands a complete inversion of where we normally look for answers about destiny, really.
Oh, absolutely.
We're taking this concept that is usually treated as like this vast cosmic ledger in the sky, and we are dragging it back down to the literal.
Which brings us to our mission today. We are unpacking a remarkably evocative, though fairly brief, excerpt from the book Invisible Power of Karma.
It's a great text.
It really is. Specifically, we're zooming in on a foundational section titled A Child of the Soil. And we're exploring its core vignette, which is called The Village That Made Me.
Right, which is all about this person named Prakash.
Exactly. It focuses on the origin story of Prakash, growing up in a Nepali village. And this text really serves as like a shortcut for you, the listener, to understand how deeply a physical place and an abstract philosophy are intertwined.
They're inseparable, honestly.
Okay, let's unpack this. In this section, the text explicitly links the grand idea of Nepali karma to the literal physical ground Prakash walked on.
Yeah, and what's fascinating here is the conceptual claim being made about identity itself. Like, the vignette isn't merely describing the village where Prakash just happened to reside.
Right, it's not just a backdrop.
No, by calling it the village that made me, the text presents the environment as an active forge. And when you pair that with the overarching theme of the section, the
Roots of Nepali karma.
Exactly. You're looking at a radical redefinition of destiny. It proposes that karma isn't just, a generic one-size-fits-all spiritual score. It is an ecological reality.
Let's lead into that botanical analogy we started with, because it really perfectly visualizes the mechanics of this idea. I mean, referring to someone as a child of the soil means looking at human development the exact way you look at a plant. You cannot understand the resilience of the stem or like the shape of the leaves without first analyzing the specific dirt in which those roots are anchored.
Because the soil dictates everything, right?
The nutrients, the struggles, the growth rate, and the soil is comprised of the decaying matter of literally everything that came before it. So, what does this all mean for how we understand karma in the context of Prakash's story?
Well, I mean, it means we have to abandon the sort of pop culture understanding of karma.
Which is usually what do people get wrong?
Often we conceptualize karma as an abstract, disconnected system of reward and punishment, like a cosmic scale of justice just floating in the ether.
Right, like a spiritual bank account or something.
Exactly. But the text is tying Nepali karma directly to the soil of this specific village. It tells us that identity and destiny are physically grown out of the environment. You inherit the karma of the soil you're planted in.
So the environment provides the raw material of your worldview.
Exactly.
I mean, I get the soil analogy, but honestly, calling karma geographic feels a little bit deterministic to me.
How so?
Well, I want to push back on this premise just a little. Are we saying Prakash has no free will? Like that he is just a passive product of his village, totally at the mercy of the dirt he was planted in?
That's a fair question.
Because if the village makes you, where is the room for personal agency, which is usually a massive part of how we even talk about karma?
And that is the exact tension the text wants us to grapple with.
Right.
It isn't arguing for absolute determinism where you have zero choices.
Okay.
Rather, it's defining the parameters of your free will. So go back to the plant in the soil. The plant still has to grow, right? It still has to reach for the sun.
Sure, yeah.
That is its agency. But the soil dictates the specific challenges that plant will face. Like if the soil is rocky and lacks water, the plant's karma, so to speak, is to develop a really deep, aggressive root system just to survive.
Oh, I see. And if the soil is rich,
then its energy goes into the canopy.
So the geography dictates the menu of options you basically have to choose from.
Precisely. Prakash has free will, but he exercises that free will within the framework provided by his Nepali village. You inherit the coping mechanisms, the blind spots, and the rhythm of the specific geography you were born into.
Wow.
Yeah, if you grow up in a village where resources are scarce, your daily habits, your reflexes, your baseline anxieties are shaped by that scarcity. That becomes your karmic baseline.
You aren't a passive product, but your choices are invariably reactions to your specific soil.
Exactly.
Think about your own hometown for a second if you're listening to this. Just picture it. The physical layout of the streets, the weather, the local industries, even like the distance between houses.
Right, all those little
How
details.
much of your daily habits today, the way you interact with strangers, or even your baseline definition of success,
Right.
how much of that was literally grown out of that specific dirt? We often think we are purely the product of our own, independent, rational choices.
We love to think that.
But so much of our default programming is just the residue of our original geography.
And that reflection brings us to the core mechanism of the text. It forces us to acknowledge that we don't exist in a vacuum. We are all children of a specific soil, and we carry the chemistry of that dirt with us long after we leave the village.
But here's a question. If we are physically grown by our environment, how does a kid actually absorb that? I mean, it isn't like you just ingest dirt and suddenly inherit a worldview.
No, thankfully not.
Right. What is the actual mechanism? Because the text transitions from this metaphorical soil to Prakash's literal lived experience by highlighting the sights and the sounds of his upbringing in the Nepali village.
Yeah, it brings the lens right down to human consciousness. We're moving from the grand philosophical concept of the roots of Nepali karma all the way down to sensory input.
It's getting really granular.
It is. The text is detailing the literal mechanism of absorption.
Well, here's where it gets really interesting to me, and again, this feels a bit counterintuitive. If the ultimate goal of the entire book is to discuss the invisible power of karma.
Which is literally the title, yeah.
Right, invisible power of karma. So
Yeah.
why does the text ground Prakash's memories so heavily in the physical, visible sights and the audible sounds of the village? Like if karma is a hidden, unseen force, isn't focusing on what a child can see and hear completely missing the point?
It seems like a contradiction.
Yeah, why not focus on his internal thoughts or like abstract philosophies?
It looks like a contradiction, but it's actually a profound synthesis of how human psychology operates. Human memory and consciousness itself cannot hold on to pure abstraction.
Okay, what do you mean by that?
We require sensory anchors. Like, a child doesn't learn the abstract rules of their culture by reading a manifesto, right? They learn it through continuous sensory exposure.
Oh, that makes sense.
You don't remember the concept of community. You remember the smell of rain on hot dust when neighbors gather on a porch.
Yeah.
You don't remember the concept of reverence. You remember the specific sound of a bell ringing at dawn or the sight of a particular shadow cast by a mountain.
So the abstract concept needs a physical hook to hang on to in the brain.
It's the only way an environment can encode itself into a human being.
Yeah.
You really cannot fully grasp the invisible forces of a culture without first understanding what its daily life looks and sounds like.
Right.
Think of it like looking at the wind.
Okay, the wind.
You cannot actually see the wind itself, right? It's entirely invisible. But you know the wind is there, you know its direction, and you know its exact velocity because you can see the leaves shaking, you can hear the branches rustling.
Oh, I love that.
The sights and sounds of the village are the leaves shaking. They are the visible, audible evidence of the invisible karmic wind blowing through Prakash's life.
The sensory details are basically the translation of the invisible into something a human being can actually experience and internalize. So when Prakash recalls the specific sights and sounds of his Nepali village, he isn't just, indulging in nostalgia.
Or remembering pretty scenery.
Exactly. He's recalling the exact shape that karma took in his daily routine.
Consider the mechanics of habit formation. If a village wakes up every single day to the sound of a particular river or the sight of a specific agricultural cycle, that rhythm dictates the nervous system of everyone living there.
Because it's relentless, it's every day.
Exactly. Repetition of these sights and sounds forms daily habits, and those habits eventually solidify into character. And character, over a lifetime, forms destiny. That is the mechanical link between a geographic soundscape and long-term karma.
It perfectly bridges the gap between the physical environment and the spiritual outcome. The sights and sounds are basically the daily data inputs that build the software of a person's worldview.
That's a great way to put it.
Which perfectly sets up the transition to the final and perhaps most crucial piece of the excerpt, because after establishing the visible sights and audible sounds, the text explicitly introduces the spiritual undercurrents of Prakash's childhood.
And this is where we move past the surface inputs and look at the ecosystem as a whole. The sights and sounds are the observable data, sure, but the spiritual undercurrents are the rules governing that data.
When I hear the phrase spiritual undercurrents, I always want to figure out how that actually functions in a society. Because we aren't talking about like a magical force field here.
No, not at all.
Let's think about it like gravity or the unspoken social physics of a community. You can't see gravity, but it completely dictates the path of least resistance for everything on the planet.
Yes, exactly.
An undercurrent in a village is the collective assumption of the people living there. It's the shared anxieties, the unspoken taboos, the collective rhythm of how neighbors treat each other during a crisis. It's this invisible weight that constantly exerts a pull on the direction of your life, dictating where you end up.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, that analogy of gravity aligns perfectly with the text's overarching goal. The spiritual undercurrents Prakash grew up with are the very roots of Nepali karma the book is examining.
Right.
An undercurrent is not a passive backdrop. It is a highly active, organizing force.
But how does an undercurrent actually dictate a person's actions mechanically? Like, give me a sense of how Prakash would actually navigate that as a kid.
Well, an undercurrent dictates behavior through social and psychological pressure. Let's say one of the spiritual undercurrents of this specific village is a profound reverence for the natural landscape.
Okay.
Perhaps viewing a nearby mountain as sacred, for example. That undercurrent means the village operates with an unspoken rule of conservation and humility.
So it's just baked into daily life.
Exactly. As a child, Prakash doesn't need to be explicitly taught some complex theology about nature. He simply observes that adults walk softer in certain areas or, they speak quieter when facing a certain direction.
He absorbs the gravity of the room.
Exactly. He feels the pull of that reverence, and his own behavior adjusts to align with it naturally. If he violates that unspoken rule, he feels the social friction.
A collective disapproval.
Yes. Over time, navigating those invisible rules becomes pure instinct. He doesn't even think about it anymore. And in the context of this book, that ingrained instinct shaped by the unseen social physics of the village is his karma.
That's incredible.
When the text says the village made him, it literally means his identity was forged by constantly swimming in those specific undercurrents until their rhythm became his own.
So if we synthesize all of this, the fragmented pieces of Prakash's origin story really lock together into this cohesive ecological picture. You have the sights and the sounds of the Nepali village. Those are the surface features.
The visible terrain.
Right. But those spiritual undercurrents, the invisible social physics beneath the surface, that is the true foundation of his Nepali karma.
It's the integration of both, really. The visible sensory inputs and the invisible spiritual pull. That is what ultimately fulfills the title, A Child of the Soil.
Right.
Prakash is an organic product of that total ecosystem. We start to realize that the soil isn't just literal dirt. It's a living matrix of history, visible sights, audible sounds, and invisible spiritual laws.
It completely reframes the concept of memory for me. I mean, when we look back at our own childhoods, we tend to separate the mundane details from the big philosophical questions of who we are.
Oh, totally.
We think the shape of our kitchen or the noise of the traffic outside our window was just like background scenery to the real story of our lives. But this text argues that they are completely inseparable.
And this raises such an important question about how we view our own trajectories. Think about it. The way the light hit your street in the morning, the specific silence of a rural field, or, the relentless hum of a city block, the unwritten rules of your neighborhood, those were not just background details. They were the raw materials of your personal karma. They were the physical hooks that the abstract rules of your society hung onto.
They are the soil that grew you.
Yeah.
The text is really making the case that you cannot truly understand the trajectory of your life until you understand the undercurrents of the specific place that manufactured your baseline instincts.
Right.
It's an invitation to look at our own origins with the same level of scrutiny and, honestly, reverence that we would apply to an ancient spiritual text.
Because knowledge is most valuable when it's actually understood and applied. Consider the undercurrents in your own daily life right now.
Yeah, think about your own village, whether that was an isolated farm, a sprawling suburb, or a dense city neighborhood.
What were the unspoken cultural norms there? Were there invisible forces of expectation or shared communal anxieties from that specific place that still dictate your reactions today? without you even realizing it.
Exactly. When you feel a sudden instinct to be overly polite, or maybe a sudden reflex of distrust, what invisible gravity from your past is pulling on you?
It's a profound thing to sit with.
It really is. To understand a massive, invisible concept like karma, we cannot start by looking up at the sky. We must first look down. We have to look at the village that made the person, the specific chemistry of the soil they grew from, and the everyday sensory undercurrents they experienced.
Absolutely.
We have to examine the sights and sounds that translated the invisible rules of the universe into the visible habits of a human life. We carry our soil with us, no matter how far our branches eventually reach. And I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over on your own today. It builds on everything we've explored regarding Prakash, his village, and the mechanics of memory. If karma is truly an invisible power, as the book suggests, is it possible that our earliest, most mundane childhood memories, the simple sights and sounds we completely take for granted, are actually the strongest karmic forces shaping our destinies today? Think about the tree. The leaves might brush against the clouds, but every single movement they make is dictated by the roots hidden deep in the dark dirt.